His mountain retreat, known as the Berghof in the Obersalzberg, would become the unofficial second seat of the Third Reich. Surrounded by his inner circle, barely recognizable without their Nazi uniforms, war plans and strategies were discussed here. His mistress Eva Braun's home movies of the Führer still exist today and gives us our best insight of the Führer's personal life. Long before he took power in Germany, his life looked a lot different. Hitler was born on the 20th of April, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small Austrian town on the border with Germany. This is where young Adolf would spend his early childhood. His father, Alois, was a local customs official. He was strict and authoritative, demanding discipline and obedience from his children. His mother, Clara, was devoted to her children, helping to offset Hitler's father with warmth and love. He was one of 6 children, however. Only he and his sister Paula would survive past childhood. As he grew older, his love for art became greater. He always had a sketchbook in his hand and dreamed of becoming a student at the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. He applied twice, but was rejected both times. Living in Vienna at the time, he was confronted with poverty and social unrest. He would support himself by selling his own pictures and paintings. It was at this point in his life that he began developing strong feelings about race, nationalism, and German identity. These feelings would help to fuel his seed of ambition and resentment, helping to shape the world for the things to come in the 20th century. In 1914, at the outbreak of World War I, Hitler enlisted in the German army with a Bavarian regiment. When Germany surrendered in 1918, his service would leave him as a drifter. He was looking for a purpose with the army after the war and was sent to spy on a far right-wing political group known at the time as the DAP, or the German Workers' Party. Though only a few years later, he would be arrested and sent to jail for leading an attempt to overthrow the Munich government, known as the Beer Hall Putsch, on November 9, 1923. He was sentenced to 5 years in Landsberg prison, a lenient sentence for committing the crime of treason. The judges were sympathetic to his cause, and he used his trial as an opportunity to speak to the German people directly. He was released for good behavior after serving only 10 months. While in prison, he would write his manifesto, Mein Kampf. His personal photographer, Heinrich Hoffmann, owned a photo shop in Munich. He employed a young woman by the name of Eva Braun. Hitler would become captivated with her, and she would eventually become his mistress. Most of the private footage we see of Hitler today was filmed by Eva. She enjoyed filming him away from the public spotlight in a more personal setting. Not long after taking control of the Nazi Party, running the party required help. He needed a staff to help oversee day-to-day operations and tasks, and so he began to form his inner circle. This video will take an in-depth look of Hitler's top aides, some of the most ruthless people to lead a nation. In the shadows of Adolf Hitler's rise to power, a group of men gathered around him, not friends, but rivals, bound together by loyalty, fear, and ambition. This was the inner circle, the men who helped build a dictatorship and who, in the end, could not escape the ruins they had created. At its center stood Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust. Born to a chicken farmer on October 7, 1900, in Munich, he attended school in Landshut, where he did well and had a particular interest in current events. He joined the Nazi Party on the 1st of August 1923, and shortly thereafter, he was involved in the Munich Beer Hall Putsch. In 1925, he joined the SS, where he rose through the ranks quickly. In 1929, he was appointed to Reichsführer of the SS by Hitler directly. Soft-spoken, almost unremarkable in appearance, yet behind his glasses lay the mind of a fanatic. As head of the SS, Himmler orchestrated the machinery of death, commanding the concentration camps that consumed millions of lives. His power grew so vast that even Hitler relied on him as the keeper of loyalty and fear. But in the war's final days, Himmler betrayed his Führer, secretly seeking peace with the Allies through Count Volker Bernadotte, a Swedish diplomat. For that betrayal, Hitler condemned him as a traitor. He fled into hiding, only to be captured. And in 1945, he swallowed poison, ending his life before he could face justice. Hermann Göring, once the hero of the First World War skies, became Hitler's chosen successor and one of the most powerful figureheads in Germany throughout the Third Reich. He was born in Rosenheim, Bavaria, on January 12, 1893. Göring was interested in becoming a soldier at a young age, and in 1912, at the age of 19, he joined the Prince Wilhelm Regiment of the Prussian Army. At the end of the First World War, the highly decorated fighter ace would stay in aviation. He would live in Denmark and work for Fokker, where he flew private flights. He would move to Munich with his wife Karin von Kanzow and join the Nazi Party in 1922. Like Himmler, he would stand by Hitler's side in the beer hall putsch. On June 19, 1940, he was promoted to Reichsmarschall, a rank specially created by Hitler to symbolize that he would be his successor. In the final days of the war, while Hitler hid away in his bunker, Göring would send the Führer a telegram stating the following: "My Führer, General Koller, today gave me a briefing on the basis of communications given to him by Colonel General Jodl and General Christian, according to which you had referred certain decisions to me and emphasized that I, in case negotiations would become necessary, would be in an easier position than you in Berlin." These views were so surprising and serious to me that I felt obligated to assume, in case by 10 o'clock no answer is forthcoming, that you have lost your freedom of action. I shall then view the conditions of your decree as fulfilled and take action for the well-being of nation and fatherland. You know what I feel for you in these most difficult hours of my life, and I cannot express this in words. God protect you and allow you, despite everything, to come here as soon as possible. Your faithful Hermann Göring. The telegram was intercepted by Martin Bormann and presented to Hitler. Göring was immediately sentenced to death and stripped of his power and responsibilities. When the war ended, he turned himself into the Americans. He would stand trial at Nuremberg, be found guilty, and sentenced to death by hanging. He bit into a concealed cyanide capsule, thought to be given to him by an American guard, which he had befriended. He died before he could face justice on October 15, 1946. Joseph Goebbels, the Reich propaganda minister and voice for Nazi Germany. He was one of Adolf Hitler's most loyal companions. Goebbels was born on the 29th of October, 1897, in Reit, an industrial town near Dusseldorf. As a child, Joseph had bad health. He had inflammation of the lungs for an extensive period of time while also having a deformed right foot. His bone was turned inward, causing him to walk with a clubbed foot. This deformity would cause him to be rejected for service at the outbreak of World War I. In March of 1933, Hitler appointed Goebbels to a newly created position known as the Reich Propaganda Minister. His speeches would get the attention
Hier bereit, mit dem Führer als Phalanx der Heimat hinter der kämpfenden Wehrmacht stehen, diesen Kampf mit wilder Entschlossenheit und unbeirrt durch alle Schicksalsbügel und fortzusetzen. kämpfen, bis der Sieg in unseren Händen ist. Ich frage euch, seid ihr entschlossen, dem Führer in der Erkämpfung des Sieges durch dick und dünn und der schwersten persönlichen Belastungen zu folgen?
In the Führer bunker, with Soviet shells shaking the city above, he and his wife Magda murdered their 6 young children before taking their own lives in the ruins of Berlin. Goebbels shaped a nation with propaganda. He crafted the lies that fueled hatred, turning radios, newspapers, and cinema into weapons of war. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, was a prominent member of Adolf Hitler's inner circle in the early years of the Reich. He was born April 26, 1894, in Alexandria, Egypt. He grew up in Bavaria and served as a soldier in World War I, in the same regiment as Hitler. After the war, he studied in Munich, where he encountered Adolf Hitler and became an early supporter of the Nazi Party. Hess officially joined the Nazi Party in 1920, soon becoming one of Hitler's most loyal followers. He took part in the failed beer hall putsch of 1923 and even served prison time alongside Hitler, during which he assisted in editing Hitler's book Mein Kampf. By the 1930s, Hess had risen to the role of Deputy Führer, acting as Hitler's personal secretary, confidant, and overseer of party matters. Though highly trusted, he was not considered a strong policymaker and wielded less influence than figures like Göring, Himmler, or Goebbels. He often felt as though he needed to compete for Hitler's attention and approval. He would attempt to get the Führer on his side permanently, and in May 1941, he took a solo flight to Scotland. His goal was to negotiate peace with Britain independently, believing he could convince them to ally with Germany against the Soviet Union. Instead, he was captured by British forces, who regarded his mission as delusional. After the war, Hess was tried at the Nuremberg trials. He spent more than 4 decades in captivity, becoming the prison's sole inmate after 1966. On August 17, 1987, at the age of 93, he was found dead in his cell, officially ruled a suicide by hanging, though some conspiracy theories claim otherwise. Albert Speer, the so-called architect of the Third Reich. Speer was born on March 19, 1905, into a well-off family of architects in Mannheim, Germany. Following in his father's footsteps, he trained as an architect and built a promising career. In 1931, amid the political upheaval of the Weimar Republic, he joined the Nazi Party. His talent quickly caught the attention of Adolf Hitler, who admired Speer's grand architectural vision. By 1934, he was designing the colossal rallies at Nuremberg and later the ambitious plans to remake Berlin into a monumental world capital. Some of his designs included the Führer bunker, where Hitler would spend his last days of the war and his life, the Olympic Stadium in Berlin, the new Reich Chancellery, the Pavillon d'Allemagne in Paris, and the Deutsches Stadion, or German Stadium, in Nuremberg. Aside from architecture, Speer's role was expanded further. In 1942, he became Minister of Armaments and War Production, where he oversaw Germany's vast war economy. His organizational skill kept factories running and extended the war far longer than expected. Yet his system relied heavily on the exploitation of forced laborers drawn from occupied lands. As the Third Reich collapsed, Speer was captured by Allied forces in 1945. At the Nuremberg trials, unlike many of his fellow Nazi leaders, he admitted responsibility for the regime's crimes. Though he denied knowledge of the full extent of the Holocaust, he was spared the death penalty, receiving 20 years in Spandau prison. Released in 1966, Speer spent his later life writing memoirs that painted himself as the good Nazi, a narrative historians continue to challenge. He died in 1981 in London from a stroke, leaving behind a legacy entwined with both immense guilt and enduring controversy. Lastly, there was Martin Bormann, the shadow in the Führer's court. Rarely seen by the public, he controlled access to Hitler. Bormann was born on June 17, 1900, in Halberstadt, Germany. He came from a modest family, and after served briefly in World War I, though he never saw combat and stayed in garrison until 1919. In 1927, Bormann joined the Nazi Party and quickly proved himself as a skilled administrator and loyal functionary. Bormann married Gerda Buch in 1929, and together they had 10 children. His wife was also deeply committed to Nazi ideology, and their household was closely tied to the regime's inner circle. Rising steadily through the ranks, Bormann became chief of staff to Rudolf Hess in 1933. After Hess's flight to Britain in 1941, Bormann gained direct access to Adolf Hitler, soon becoming his private secretary and head of the party chancellery. From this position, he controlled access to Hitler, managed party affairs, and exerted immense influence over the inner workings of the Nazi state. During the final days of the Reich in 1945, Bormann fled Hitler's bunker in Berlin on May 1st. He was reported to have been killed the following day while attempting to escape the city, though for decades his fate remained uncertain. In absentia, the Nuremberg trials sentenced him to death for war crimes and crimes against humanity in 1946. In the early years of World War II, the world watched in shock as the Nazi war machine tore across Europe with unprecedented speed and precision. From the lightning strikes of the Blitzkrieg in Poland in 1939 to the rapid fall of France in 1940, German tanks and troops moved like a storm, coordinated, ruthless, unstoppable. Nations fell in weeks, their defenses crushed under waves of mechanized fury and relentless air assaults. The swastika rose over once free cities, and Hitler's empire seemed destined to dominate the continent. The Wehrmacht came within 20 kilometers of Moscow. The Russians were scrambling and didn't have an answer for the German onslaught, and they were nearly brought to their knees. When all looked promising for the Germans, Hitler wanted Stalingrad. Winter. The situation was hopeless. The Red Army closed in, street by street. The mighty Wehrmacht, once symbols of German power, now faced annihilation. On January 31st, 1943, Paulus finally surrendered to Soviet forces. The first German field marshal ever to be captured alive. Hitler was furious, declaring he should have taken his own life. Of the more than 300,000 German troops who entered Stalingrad, only a fraction would ever return home. The defeat shattered the illusion of Nazi invincibility and marked the turning point of World War II. In April 1945, the Battle of Berlin marked the final and bloodiest chapter of World War II in Europe. Amid the ruins, Hitler's Third Reich crumbled, its armies shattered, its leaders defeated. As the Red Army raised their flag over the Reichstag, the once mighty Nazi regime met its end. Days later, Hitler was dead, and Germany lay in ashes, signaling the fall of a dictatorship and the dawn of a divided world. On May 8, 1945,
Bevor ich die Frage des Gerichtshofes beantworte, ob ich mich schuldig oder nicht schuldig bekenne,
I informed the court that defendants were not entitled to make a statement. You must plead guilty or not guilty.
bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig.
Rudolf Hess.
Nein.
Albert Speer.
Now the backroom Nazi and armaments chief.
Nicht schuldig.
In 1933, Adolf Hitler rose from political obscurity to become Chancellor of Germany, promising to restore pride, power, and prosperity to a nation humiliated after World War I. With fiery speeches and ruthless propaganda, he convinced millions that he alone could rebuild Germany's greatness. The Nazi Party seized control through fear, manipulation, and the silencing of dissent. Support poured in, from industrialists seeking profit, soldiers craving redemption, and ordinary citizens desperate for stability. Under Hitler's rule, Germany rearmed, reoccupied lost territories, and unleashed a wave of nationalism that swept across Europe. Many believed they were building a new empire, until the truth revealed itself in the brutality of war and the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust. The same people who once cheered in the streets found themselves trapped in a nightmare of destruction and death. As the Allies closed in from all sides, the Reich that promised 1,000 years crumbled in just 12. Cities lay in ruins, millions were dead, and Hitler's most loyal followers, men like Himmler, Goebbels, and Goering, faced capture or suicide. In 1945, the Third Reich fell, and at Nuremberg, its surviving architects stood trial for crimes against humanity. The world watched as justice was served, not just upon a regime, but upon an idea that had consumed a nation. Nazi Germany's rise and fall remains a haunting reminder of how power, fear, and blind loyalty can destroy even the most civilized of societies. After the devastation of the Second World War, Europe lay in ruins, its cities shattered, its people broken. But from the ashes rose determination. Nations united to rebuild and shared a desire for peace. In 1949, NATO was formed, a powerful alliance built not for conquest, but for protection. Together, they vowed, never again would tyranny divide the world.